I guess we'll start by introducing ourselves. My name is Sarah Berman. I live here. I got my start many years ago doing labor organizing, and this is kind of where I found my niche in Fairbanks in recent times.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Rohrbacher. Originally I'm from Juneau. This is Aralia, our newest member for the whole Just Transition Summit. I'm one of the facilitators for the Keep It in the Ground working group of Fairbanks Climate Action Coalition.
Hi everyone, I'm Sikanip, and I live here in Fairbanks from Utqiagvik and Nilksit, and I've been helping with Keep It in the Ground for about 2 years, so thanks.
Good morning everyone, I'm Odin Miller. I'm originally from Juneau, but I've lived here for quite a number of years. I'm Phoebe's partner and Aurelia's father, and I'm co-facilitator of the Keep It in the Ground working group. We have a few slides, and we're kind of going to do a panel type of format, and Phoebe's going to ask us some questions sort of about our campaign around oil tax subsidies.
All right, so I guess we should probably learn a little bit about what the campaign is. So I'm going to just ask the panelists. So what's the issue that the campaign is trying to impact? And I guess somebody can talk a bit about what the campaign is, and what are the campaign's goals, who are the major players, and why have you chosen to do this campaign?
All right, so as Phil explained a little bit in our introduction, this campaign's Fund Our Future, subsidizing big oil. Each year, the state of Alaska pays $1.2 billion in subsidies to the oil industry for new exploration. So in other words, in a time of limited state funding, state resources, we're told we can't afford schools, we can't afford public safety, we can't afford health, yet we are paying over $1 billion out of our state budget for the oil industry to go out and find new oil wells that are giving us, that are exacerbating our climate crisis.
Yeah, and part of our goal is to shift the conversation, because right now there's a lot of talk about the oil companies not paying their fair share, they're not paying taxes, et cetera, et cetera. This is another piece of that, specifically about money going to subsidize new exploration, not just existing wells. But we want the conversation to be a movement away from the oil industry entirely. So we don't want any new exploration, we don't want any new wells. And we're kind of trying to hold the radical flank and shift the public conversation into a new area of what does Alaska look like when we stop going to look for money in new oil wells and instead start investing in different kinds of energy and shifting our economy.
So for me, I think what's unique, or what brought me to this campaign, is that it applies to every single person in Alaska, no matter where you're from. We're all affected deeply by this oil economy, this bust and boom economy. And my family being from up north, I can see the direct health impacts that happen and what we're really truly paying for oil, and the economics that we get from it. And as Odin had said, we don't even have the funding for most of what we need. So we have this narrative that we need oil, but what I've seen personally is that the health of each community, including Anchorage, Fairbanks, and the places that I've been able to be at, the health has declined severely. Mental health, physical health, spiritual health. We're seeing that our communities are getting sicker even though we continue to find oil. So how do we transition away from that, while also talking about we don't have to be in what you would call Western poverty to transition away from oil. We can have a just transition.
Yeah, and I think one of the things our group grappled with is how can we be part of this movement without kind of invading into what the indigenous movements are already doing? They're already working to protect Anwar. They've already got a lot of stuff going. And so by attacking it from a different angle that's not being really dealt with at the moment, we can be part of the movement and support and be allies to some of the indigenous movements that are already happening without kind of stepping on other people's toes.
All right, thank you, everybody. So Sikanik, I have a question for you specifically. So how does this campaign connect with the issue of climate change and its impacts on Alaska's peoples?
So, I think that I want to start with that we keep running to the problem in the first place for the solution. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to fund getting out of this climate crisis by digging more oil, putting more fossil fuels into the air and into our climate. And when we, in the past, have seen Alaska try to get away, or I should say get our fair share of the money that's happening with oil, we don't talk about the fact that it's causing so many issues that we need this economy for. And that is including when we go up to the rural villages, there's 12 that are in immediate danger of falling into the ocean right now. And we don't have the funding for it. That's what the Alaskan government keeps saying, yet we want to put them even, at further risk faster by continuing oil exploration. So I think this campaign specifically is talking about how do we fund our future without putting the most vulnerable people in Alaska in danger with really their entire lives.
All right, thanks for that. So, some people might argue that if we take away money from oil companies, that it's going to lead to more budget cuts because we won't have money to fund the state. So, what would be the response to that?
And this was a big conversation back when SB 21 was going down, and the oil companies funded a huge counter campaign against it, saying, if you try to tax us more, you're going to lose your PFD, you're going to lose Alaskan jobs, Alaskan people will have less money in their pockets. And what actually happened is, like, days after SB 21, well, it was after the recall campaign lost, BP fired 400 people. Mm-hmm. The Alaska state owes the oil companies money because of the tax subsidies that we're paying to them. So right now, Alaska, well, let me ask you, guess what percentage in production revenue they've paid in taxes to the state last year? 1.5%. Yeah, and when it was originally started, it was supposed to be a third to the state, it was a third, and we're getting way less than that. So, taxing the oil companies or ending subsidies is not equivalent to money out of Alaskans' pockets. And I guess that would be my take-home point there.
All right, so the Fair Share Act campaign, which was recently rolled out, is trying to change oil tax structures. And I can see we were worried about how this could be confused with our campaign. So maybe Sarah can explain about how this campaign is different than the Fair Share Act campaign.
Yeah, that just goes along with what I was just saying. So the tax structure, the oil companies pay taxes based on their production. They pay property taxes, corporate taxes, and those are on existing wells, and that's what SB 21 is about. That's what the Fair Share Act is about. But what the Fair Share Act isn't even touching is new exploration and subsidies. Like, we are literally paying companies to look for places to dig new wells. So not only is it money out of our budget while we're facing like extreme economic austerity measures, but it's furthering the oil economy. It's looking for new wells. So that's the difference. So the Fair Share Act, they didn't even touch the issue of subsidies for new exploration.
I'd just like to add, for those of you who don't know, the Fair Share Act is a ballot initiative proposed for being on the ballot this next election cycle in 2020. It was proposed by an Anchorage lawyer, Robin Brenna, and basically, yeah, it would increase taxes on legacy wells, so kind of the large, long-established wells such as Prudhoe Bay on the North Slope. And keep it in the ground working group. We don't oppose the Fair Share Act. It's our focus is keeping fossil fuels in the ground, and so we can't really support the Fair Share Act because it doesn't do that.
And I just want to add, you mentioned that the Fair Share Act is, it's coming from the top down, and they're not really doing a lot of grassroots organizing, and so that's something that this campaign is hoping to do, is start from the bottom up. So the next question is, what's our understanding of how change on an issue like this comes about, and how's our campaign going to bring about that change?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that right now, Alaska for a long time, it has this self-image as an oil state, and I think, a lot of people are like, oh, well, we can't take on the oil industry because, it's sort of part of Alaska's ego, it's sort of part of our, self-identity, And, that's probably true to a large extent, but I think even a lot of people maybe who kind of support the oil industry or have mixed feelings about it, people don't like seeing corruption and cronyism, and there was a lot of populist anger. For example, Phil mentioned the VICO scandals around 2006. There was a lot of populist anger about that when it turned out that politicians were literally being bought off with oil money. But so there was some changes and reforms that happened around that time. But since then, in a lot of ways, it seems like our political system has kind of slid back into sort of at least an implicitly pretty corrupt pattern. So we're really trying to tap into this kind of what we feel is kind of popular anger. We saw when Dunleavy vetoed 400 and some million from the state budget, a lot of people were outraged, like, we depend on these services. And then, meanwhile, we want to connect that with the fact that, well, he vetoed, these 400 and some million, but he still found the 1.2 billion to pay for new oil exploration. So we see this as like a really great opportunity to change the conversation around the oil industry. Right now, people see it as, well, maybe it's not perfect, but we need it economically. But we're really trying to kind of organize, from the bottom up and get people to kind of look at the oil industry in kind of a different light, get people to look at it as like, oh, actually our whole political system is kind of oriented toward, rolling out the carpet for new oil exploration, and our state always manages to find money for that, even when it can't find money to pay for schools. So we're trying to, use the material interests of Alaskans to turn people against the oil. We're suffering economic consequences because of oil dependency. And this harkens back to what Sarah was saying, I guess, about, there's a lot of kind of, land-based campaigns like the Arctic Refuge and the offshore drilling, which we fully support and we've been involved in. A lot of Alaskans have never been to the Arctic Refuge. A lot of Alaskans have never, been to the Chukchi Sea, but we can see what's happening in our own communities, when, a homeless population expands because of cuts to services, things like that. So we're trying to build grassroots popular power, and yeah.
All right, thank you. So kind of adding to that, the next question is for FCAC. Why do we think this is an issue that's going to appeal to the Alaskan public?
So this issue speaks to everyone, as I had said before, but I think as we've been talking about having this blatant corruption in front of our face of political leaders, and what we've seen in the past is that a governor may, pardon my words, but screw over one population, right? But keep really good with a few others. But what we saw with this governor is that he went after almost every single person except for oil. And it really, we could say it was a blessing in disguise, although there are so many damages and people's lives that have been affected. I don't want to put it in that way. But we were seeing that people came together, were rising up, were saying that enough is enough. We want to keep that momentum going, because if we can see that historically this has always been this way. And when we look at how do we transition into an equitable society, we need to change our values. And we can see every single one of these issues is connected. When we value oil extraction, we hurt people's health, we hurt the animals' health. But when we shift into a new perspective, new values, you can see that this is intersectional. This is going to affect each part of our state when we start to look at how do we invest in renewables, how do we invest in our future. And going from Juneau to Utqiagvik to Fairbanks, we're going to see that this is something that can uniquely affect every person, and so they are able to contribute uniquely to this campaign as well. And how is this going to specifically help your community, but having a united way to have that grassroots power that we haven't seen in the past. And just to quickly, with the Fair Share Act, I had asked one of the people that were working on this act, how do the North Slope people feel about this? Have you, what's their opinion? And they were like, oh, gosh, we didn't even ask. And I'm like, the legacy oil, fields that you're talking about, that you're making this entire campaign about, is going to directly affect the Inupiaq people of the North Slope, but you haven't even involved them. And I think what we're seeing very differently is this is grassroots, and that's where we see the power. And we see the power with this administration that had to give a lot of the funding back, even though they were determined not to, because we showed up united. And that's what I think this campaign is going to be, is getting everyone in the state united. So, thanks.
She's so mad about the subsidies that are being given to the oil industry. I'm mad too. Tell us. I think, let's see, Sarah is going to tell us what are the main strategies that this campaign is going to use to guide our approach.
We came up with 5 different strategies: building, organizing, capacity, structures, and communications to establish a campaign blueprint that will facilitate decentralized organizing. So basically, we're all based in Fairbanks, but this is a statewide issue. So we're going to work towards building a statewide network of people that can respond to this issue and organize in their own communities independently and also in a coordinated effort. It goes along with number 2, movement building, act, recruit, train. So that's, finding people in various communities that want to be involved, that are interested in taking the leadership role, and training them to do so effectively. Moral protest, so be able to, respond to things that come up, like a crazy budget, for example, and create a sense of urgency, capitalize on scandals. And so having a network in place will allow us to do that. So, when something hits, we can be like, hey, we need to respond to this, and ideally have people responding in communities across the state. Make oil tax credits into a major issue that candidates have to answer to coming up to the 2020 election. So this is a really good year to be launching this campaign because it is a big election year. So ideally, as the election year gets into full swing, we can start pressuring our candidates, start bringing this issue to the table, and again, working towards shifting that conversation, making candidates answer to the idea that the oil industry is not our future and how are they going to fund our future. And promote just transition initiatives and highlight allies and other groups who are doing just transition work. So many of you are part of different groups. We are a network of people, so just making sure we're supporting each other in our actions. Yeah.
All right, so Sikanik, can you tell us how can people here become involved in this campaign?
So we have, I don't know if it's gonna be on here. We haven't gotten to a place where we are in a place where we can have people still involved, right? To kind of help us figure out the few, have people, I'm losing words right now, sorry. But what we're hoping to do is get people in each region, as we've been kind of talking about, to uniquely get their community involved. How does this look in your community? What is going to be the effects if we start to tax oil companies differently? What, are you missing in your community? And for me, specifically up north, we are having our language programs, our immersion programs really cut back, right? But we have all of this oil money. Why is that happening? Why are we losing our language when we have every dispensable resource available? And so that would be something that my community could speak to, right? But in Juneau, it's going to be really different. And so what we hope to do is be able to have people that are motivated, interested in this campaign, and we can come together and have those leaders supported, knowledgeable, have the resources to be able to do community organizing around the campaign, get people comfortable. But we also are hoping to have anyone that is interested in actually being in like the nitty-gritty of all of this, come to some of our planning meetings, see, maybe you think something's missing, maybe you think that we should add something. We want that. So after this, we really hope that you can come and sign up. And over here on a piece of paper, do you want to volunteer once the campaign is launched? Do you want to be in the campaign before it launches and to help develop it? Whatever your level of capacity, interest is, we're really hoping to get that support. We want everyone involved. Like we said, this is a statewide issue. We're not the ones that are going to dictate how it goes and then tell you. We want to be able to have the community involved. So if you want to talk to any of us after this, please feel free. And okay. So that's all. Thanks.
I wanted to add, I think Sikanik kind of alluded to this, but we're trying to organize around kind of a hubs-based model. And so these are sort of this is sort of what Sikanik was talking about, that there's sort of, within each community, or even there could be multiple within a community, there's sort of a self-contained hub. Where there's sort of a team that coordinates the campaign, there's a team that does outreach and base building, there's a team that does actions and strategy. And so, like we're kind of one in Fairbanks, and if somebody wanted to start one in Juneau, like a couple of organizers, then they could. In any community throughout the state, yeah. And we're trying to organize in a way that's sort of, I guess, self-perpetuating, where we're not just kind of mobilizing to come out and take an action, like a one-time action, but we're trying to encourage people to start reaching out within their own communities. And this is why we've kind of, we've spent a lot of the last several months planning out sort of the structure, developing a campaign DNA for our campaign. We're still sort of involved in that process. Like, we haven't launched in any big or formal way, and we probably won't for a number of months, but we're kind of sort of gradually trying to, get people more familiar with what we're doing, do some public events, that kind of thing, sort of gradually working to build up our organizing capacity.
So we have some, let's see. Let me just look at this paper here. So Sorry, I got a little distracted with the baby. So let's see. I guess one of you guys is going to address the timeline. Are we going to do that? Okay. Could somebody talk about the timeline?
So for the timeline, we want in 2020 to build a campaign structure, capacity, communications, identity, and network with key allies. And we need so many people that have good communication skills, good organizing skills. Maybe your jam is calling people on a phone. That's not my jam. So we really need localized, low-key, small-scale events to help refine campaign and build narratives. And then we are going to have a few hubs established, and what that means is maybe halfway through the year, after this Just Transition Summit, a few people are going to come up and say they're interested, and then we're going to be able to have those hubs kind of get going off feet. So scale up organizing and actions, push as election issues. As Sarah had said, this is a huge year for elections, and then to use momentum to promote new hubs. And as we said, this is going to be a long-term goal. This is a long-term strategy. And so we're hoping by the end of 2020 that more people are going to start hearing about this. We're going to have more people that are interested and motivated to do this in their communities. And then 2021, build demand for legislator to address in budget. And as we saw with the Dunleavy administration, people power is going to be our biggest tool. We may not have all the money in the world or all the political power in the world, but we have people power, and that is what we're going to be really trying to get the momentum to start building. And then use that momentum to promote and establish new hubs. So we're going to continue in 2021 to get this to be a very statewide initiative and have people feeling really secure in this campaign, that they have no issues. And something that I wanted to kind of say is that we've seen oil companies come into our communities and tear them apart. Being someone that is an impact from up north, I've lived that my entire life. And when we are able to be in solidarity and really take that and say, hey, I'm not going to speak for this person in the community. They can speak for themselves, and they're going to say why this is going to work, why we need this. And that's what we really hope in these 2 years to get established. Thanks.
Well, we have some questions. We're going to break up into groups and do questions, but it's 12:28 right now. You guys might be hungry. Should we pass these out?
Yeah, I think you're welcome.
Yeah, so here's, for now, well, I kind of just want to read you guys the questions just so that you guys are thinking about them, because I think they're good questions. So maybe you can just ponder these while you're eating lunch and talk amongst yourselves. So we've talked, and this is stuff we're discussing, how can we engage a diverse cross-section of Alaskans as real partners? So campaigns like this oftentimes fail to reach a diverse cross-section of the population and get kind of stuck in their own little group. So trying to, reach other people, and especially in Alaska, it's physically hard to reach people. So figuring out how to do that effectively. How can we end oil subsidies without marginalizing Alaskans who have depended on oil? So we're thinking specifically of North Slope workers, people that live up north who get a bunch of grant money, et cetera, from the oil industry, who might be, they might be considered like losers of this campaign if we were to win. So how can we include them in the conversation and make sure that they are protected as we transition? And then the last question is, what do we see as Alaska's strengths and weaknesses in a transition to a post-oil economy? Because we're a unique place. We have a lot of unique strengths and weaknesses. So, think about that while you're eating lunch. And I'll just put some of these on each table. So if you're interested in staying informed or being involved in our campaign, just put your name down and contact information, and that would be great.
Thank you. And as you think about these questions, feel free to come up to any of us if you have any thoughts or ideas for us on any of these. or anything else.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.